Dear students, now let's take a look at comprehension. I'm sure you've read the questions through as well as the passage. Did we manage to find any clues to solve the questions? Let's go through the questions together. But before that, this man, he looks really angry. I guess that could be because his plate is empty. So therefore, I think he looks like he's both hungry and angry. Let's find out why. In question 1, explain what hangry means. We can find the clues to solve this question in paragraph 1. Let's take a look at paragraph 1. Do we see the definition of hangry? Oh yes, we do. When people are overdue for a feed that suggests that they are hungry, they may become grumpy and short-tempered. So there you go. Hungry and angry. Therefore, we use the term hangry to refer to people who are short-tempered and grumpy when they are hungry. How about question 2? Let's read question 2. There are two parts to this question. First of all, what are some of the things that our body need from the food we eat? What nutrients do these food provide for us? Let's go back to paragraph 2 to find out more. In paragraph 2, let's zero down to the keywords. Our body needs food. Now, what kind of food? Here, we have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. These are the different classes of food that we can find in the foods that we consume, which are digested into simple forms such as glucose, amino acids, and free fatty acids. After they are digested, these nutrients pass into our bloodstream. They are distributed to our organs and tissues and used. So that's how we get the nutrients that we need. Does this solve question 2? Oh yes, it does. Take a look. To solve part 1 of question 2, our bodies need carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. These classes of foods are then digested into simple sugars such as glucose, amino acids, and free fatty acids before being assimilated in the body. There you go. Let's move on to question 3. What is the life-threatening situation referring to in paragraph 3? Well, let's go back to paragraph 3. In paragraph 3, I see a life-threatening situation. But what does it refer to? Take a look at the clues around these keywords. If your blood glucose level falls far enough, your brain will perceive it as a life-threatening situation. So there you go. To solve question 3, the life-threatening situation refers to the sudden fall of blood glucose levels. So there you go. As we read through the passage carefully, we can look for the keywords to help us solve the questions that follow. Let's move on to question 4. In question 4, what does critically dependent tell us about our brain? Let's go back to paragraph 3. Here, can you find the keyword? Critically dependent. What is critically dependent? There you go. Your brain. For your brain to work well, your brain is critically dependent on glucose, the simple sugar that we derive after digestion of carbohydrates. So there you go. Glucose is very important for our brains to function. So, let's go back to question 4. Here, it tells us how our brain relies heavily on glucose for its condition as well as function. There you go. Question 4. Let's move on to question 5. What are some side effects when a person is low on glucose? Let's move back to paragraph 4. In paragraph 4, we realize that the keywords are right over here. Blood glucose levels drop. So what are the consequences of blood glucose levels? Seriously low levels of these blood glucose levels. You may find it hard to concentrate. You may make silly mistakes, or you realize that your words might become muddled or slurred. There you go. For question 5, some side effects, some bad consequences that a person might experience when he's low on blood glucose will be these. He might find it hard to concentrate. He might make silly mistakes. And his speech might become muddled or slurred. Shall we move on to question 6? In question 6, we are asked to list the 3 reasons for being hangry. Let's refer back to paragraph 6. First of all, let's zero in on the keywords. Reason that people can become hangry. And the first one is definitely a drop in blood glucose concentrations. There you go. A drop in blood glucose concentrations, which also means a drop in the levels of your blood glucose. How about the second reason? Let's go back to the same paragraph in paragraph 6. Here, another keyword presents itself. Another reason why people can be hangry is the glucose counter-regulatory response. And that is our second reason. In this response, when blood glucose levels drops to a certain threshold level, our brain sends instructions to several organs to synthesize and release hormones to increase the amount of glucose in our bloodstream. That's pretty smart. And for the third reason, both hunger and anger is controlled by one common gene. Now, where do you think we can find this reason? Let's go down to paragraph 9. Very clearly, the clue word, another reason. Hunger is linked to anger, which is hangry. There you go. And what is this reason here in this paragraph? Well, that is because both hunger and anger are controlled by common genes. And this gene is neuropeptide Y. There you go. The last reason for being hangry. Because both hunger and anger, they're controlled by one common gene. Let's move on to question 7. In question 7, you're asked to find which two glucose counter-regulatory hormones are also stress hormones. Well, let's take a look at paragraph 7. In paragraph 7, you realize there are a lot of information there. First of all, you have the growth hormone. You also have glucagon, adrenaline, which is also called epinephrine, and lastly, cortisol. These are all glucose counter-regulatory hormones. But to answer the question, it says which two of these hormones are also stress hormones. Let's look carefully. There you go. These latter two glucose counter-regulatory hormones are stress hormones released into your bloodstream when you're faced with a stressful situation. There you go. So the latter two that was described in the list refers to not the first one, not the second one, but the last two, which is adrenaline as well as cortisol. There you go. To answer the question, the names of the stress hormones are adrenaline and cortisol. Question 8. What is the natural brain chemical referring to? And what is its purpose? Let's take a look at the passage to find out. In paragraph 8, we see the name of the chemical right here in paragraph 9. This is a natural brain chemical released into the brain when you're hungry, and it is called neuropeptide Y. And what does it do? Follow me to paragraph 10. In paragraph 10, the purpose of neuropeptide Y is described. It is used to regulate anger or aggression. So there you go. The name of the natural brain chemical would be neuropeptide Y. And its purpose to control hunger and regulate our anger or aggression. Question 9. What are the 2 reasons why we should avoid eating quick fix foods? Let's go back to paragraph 12. In paragraph 12, we find out more about quick fix foods, such as chocolate, potato chips. Now, what is the reason why we should avoid eating these quick fix foods? Here in paragraph 12, quick fix foods or junk food, they generally cause large rises of blood glucose levels that come crashing down fast. So this blood glucose level goes up really fast and comes crashing down really fast too. That's probably why we should not have too much of junk food. And that pretty much explains question 9. Quick fix foods, they induce large rises in blood glucose levels, which fall really fast. And in that case, when that happens, you might feel hungrier and angrier than before. Moving on to question 10. Explain how a survival mechanism is effective in describing hunger. Let's go back to paragraph 11. In paragraph 11, I see the word survival mechanism. Do you see it? Right over here. Survival mechanism. And what is that? Let's read on. If hungry organisms stood back and graciously let others eat before them, their species could die out. We don't want that to happen. So, in order to preserve our species, we should think about survival mechanism. So there you go. A survival mechanism helps with our survival instincts for self-preservation of our species or any species. Question 11. Which of the following is the most appropriate title? As you can see described in the passage, we understand the reasons for becoming angry when we are hungry. The scientific explanation, the science that's happening in our bodies. So therefore, for this question, the most appropriate title for this comprehension, The Science of Hangry. Moving on. In question 12, let's decide if these are true or false statements. First of all, growth hormones and glucagon are stress hormones. Well, that's false. Let's take a look at paragraph 7 to find out why. Remember in paragraph 7, growth hormones are presented here as well as glucagon. And are these stress hormones? No, they are not. The stress hormones are adrenaline and cortisol. So therefore, growth hormones and glucagon are not stress hormones. Therefore, false. The next statement, nutritious food keeps us feeling full for a longer period of time. That is quite true. Let's take a look at paragraph 12 again. Remember we learned about quick fix food? These junk food, they increase our blood glucose level really fast, leaving us feeling hungrier when the blood glucose level comes crashing down fast again. So therefore, instead of having quick fix food or junk food, let's have nutritious food. Nutritious food keeps us feeling full for a longer period of time. How about the next statement? The brain uses both sugar and fat as fuel. Well, this is a tricky one, but I'm sure you'll be able to find out. Let's move on to the passage. Remember, we already know that the blood glucose level affects the brains. So, that gives us a very good clue that the brain uses sugar. How about fat? In paragraph 14, this is quickly described. When you go without food, your body may start to break down its own fat stores for energy, some of which are converted into ketones, a product of fat metabolism. So there you go. Ketones. They can actually They can also help keep your hunger under control because, there you go, your biggest clue, your brain can use ketones in place of glucose for fuel. There you go, the brain can use both glucose or sugar and fat as fuel. And the last statement there, cultural influences does not influence verbal aggression. That's false. And we see why this is so in paragraph 11. Here, they describe cultural influences. Whether you express verbal aggression directly or indirectly, it really depends on your culture. Some people are just more polite. Some people are just more verbal. So there you go, it does affect. So cultural influences does affect verbal aggression. So therefore, this is a false statement. Let's try to learn some new words. Let's increase our vocabulary bank. In question 13, we see some words that we can try to define. Pulses refer to rhythmic vibrations. Well, let's use it in a sentence. A dolphin emits short pulses of ultrasound. There you go. We have pulses too. If you gently place your fingers on your wrists, you'll feel this plop, 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 plop rhythm. How about 13b, embedded? When something is embedded, one definition says it can be built in as an integral part of a device. For example, for this machine, it eliminates the need for an embedded controller for the machine, which means I don't need to embed or integrate a controller for the machine. (13c) Inching forward. When you inch forward, you move forward really slowly and carefully. Now, why would you be doing that? See this cat? The cat was inching forward really slowly in order not to alert its prey. Good move. 13d, excessive, more than necessary. For example, Tom was drinking excessive amounts of Coke. Well, that's way too much. Way too much than needed. How about the word conventional? If something is conventional, it is considered to be common, regular, or even traditional. For example, in many cultures, a handshake is a conventional greeting exchanged between people meeting for the first time. That is quite true, even in our culture. Question 14. Let's take a look at the order of events as occurred and described in the story. The first thing that happens when you're hungry, your brain can detect the low levels of glucose in your bloodstream. And your brain will release hormones. Your brain will tell the body to release hormones to increase the level of glucose back in your bloodstream. That's quite smart. And remember, because of neuropeptide Y, this gene also controls anger, which means when you're hungry, you're most likely to snap at your family and friends. And let's say if you still don't get your glucose fix. Your body is very smart. It also will try to break down fats and you get ketones. So there you go. If your brains have insufficient amounts of glucose, it will find ways to help itself. Step 3. And now let's take a look at the last question of the passage. Contrast the differences. Contrast suggests we need to find the differences. Right? So first of all, let's take a look at drop in glucose in the blood levels. Why do this happen? Let's take a look at paragraph 3. Here you go. When the nutrients circulating in your bloodstream starts to drop, your blood glucose level tends to fall as well, because one of these nutrients, simple sugar glucose. So the evidence presents here, blood glucose level falls when nutrients circulating in your bloodstream starts to drop. One of these nutrients refers to your blood glucose level. How do we react to this? How does the body react to this? The body has this glucose counter-regulatory response. So this is a reaction of the body in response to low glucose levels, because the brain really needs glucose as a fuel. Remember? So there you go. Where can we find evidence for this? Let's take a look at paragraph 7. Let's take a look. Here, the brain instructs the organs in the body to release hormones to increase the amount of glucose, to regulate the amount of glucose in your bloodstream. Do we remember the names of these hormones? These glucose counter-regulatory hormones. They are growth hormone, glucagon, as well as two others which are also stress hormones, adrenaline, as well as cortisol. There you go. Our brain instructs the organs to release hormones to increase the amount of glucose in our bloodstream. Stress hormones are also released in response to something that threatens your safety. And lastly, last but not least, both hunger and anger are controlled by one common gene. And that is true. We find this evidence in paragraph 9. Remember neuropeptide Y, a natural brain chemical released into the brain when you're hungry? It controls both hunger and anger. And it helps us to regulate anger or aggression. So there you have it. It helps us to control hunger, anger, and aggression by acting on Y1 receptors, and therefore it's called neuropeptide Y. Alright, there you go. We learned a lot of science regarding hunger and anger. Thank you.